Welcome to my beginning watercolor tip 15, Mixing Greens Part 1. This will be followed by beginning watercolor tip 16, Mixing Greens Part 2. In these two videos, I'll explore different ways to mix green using the colors that I have on my palette. Part 1 will focus on convenience greens, or greens coming straight out of the tube. Part 2 will focus on mixed greens, greens that are mixed from my palette using yellow and blue. This will be the output of these two videos, part 1 and part 2. I've divided a quarter sheet of watercolor paper into 6 squares that I'll refer to as cards. The top 3 are mixes made using convenience greens, or greens that come straight out of the tube, and the bottom 3 are mixtures that are made from mixing blue and yellow together to get a green, and then mixing further from there. I'm going to begin with the top card, and it's a little tough to get the palette and the work surface into one shot, but I think it's important that you see me mix the colors as I do this. So to make it a little clearer on exactly what I'm doing on that paper, I'm going to insert the card here. So I've started to apply my first color, and for each one of these cards I'm going to have 3 colors. I'll have the green in the middle, in this case it's a sap green. I'll have a red to the left to warm up that green, and I'll have a blue to the right to cool down that green. And you'll see as I do this, I'll put a variation of these mixtures between these colors. So on this chart I've put my Pyro red and I've put my sap green. And then at the bottom I'm also putting a brush mark of each one of these colors, and then I'm going to come back with some water and let those paints mix on the paper, and you can see the variation of color that you get when that happens. So this other color that I'm putting down is royal blue. So the 3 colors that are being used for this card are sap green, which is the convenience green, royal blue to cool the cut mixture down, and Pyro red to warm the mixture up. So it's a little hard to see here for this distance, but I'm just taking some water and it's just letting those paints mingle on the paper, and if you look at the card you can see the result of that wash that I'm doing there. So you can see as it goes to the right it gets a little starts to get cooler, starts to get more blue, and there's areas where it gets kind of neutral, and especially to the left where the red and the green mix, you start to get some neutral grays in that mixture. So that's with the paper, or with the paint mixing on the paper. Now I'm mixing some of the colors on my palette. So I'm taking the Pyro red and the sap green. In this instance, what I'm doing is taking a pure mixture, and I'm going to show a dark value of the combination. So this is a dark value sap green and Pyro red. So it's like a warm neutral green, but it's a darker value because I had less water in the mixture. Now I'm taking the sap green with a heavy concentration of pigment and royal blue, and I'm going to put a dark value brush mark of this color combination. So to the left it's a warmer dark value, and to the right it's a cooler dark value. I've cleaned my palette a bit and put new samples of each paint down there, and now I'm going to take the sap green, I'm going to mix it with some of the Pyro red, and this isn't as heavy a concentration as the dark value mark that I made, but it's going to start by taking that green and warming it up just a little bit, so that brush mark I'm putting there right beside the sap green on the left is a warmer green. It's still very green, but it's a bit warmer. And the next brush mark is going to have much more Pyro red in it, and it's going to be much warmer, and you can see the difference in the mark that's beside the Pyro red and the one that's beside the sap green, but they are different than the pure sap green or the pyro red because they've been mixed together. And now I'm cooling it down by mixing in the royal blue. So that gives me a kind of a cool blue-green tone, still leaning more green than blue. And now I'm going to put in a little bit more blue, and it's going to be a much cooler blue-green. Now keep in mind, this is just a sample of some of the greens that you can mix just using an average palette. There's people that have put chart after chart after chart out there with hundreds of squares of different greens that you can mix, and if you really want to research what's possible, you can go out there and look at those. But I'm just trying to give an example of what's possible using your palette and just mixing a couple colors and a way to make natural greens. The next three colors that I'm going to use for this card are Quinacridone Rose, Viridian, and Royal Blue. Quinacridone Rose is a cool red, Viridian's a cool green, and Royal Blue is a cooler blue. This mixture isn't going to really, these mixtures are going to give you some cool colors and not necessarily the types of mixtures that you're going to see, say, in a landscape. These are more likely to be colors that you call them almost designer colors, where you're going to see them on a fabric or clothes or something like that. But you could definitely do landscape with them, but they're not necessarily the natural type of colors, the earth tones that you're getting with some of the other mixes that I'll do. Working with the sap green and the pyro red, you can get some very natural looking greens. When you mix the Quinacridone Rose and the Viridian, they're pretty complementary, and you can get a gray, kind of a charcoal gray, pretty quick. So here I'm mixing some water and letting those paints mingle on the paper there, and you can see by looking at the inserted card the effect that I get there. Now I'm going to begin mixing the Viridian with a little bit of my blue and my rose. So here I'm taking a little rose and mixing it with the green, and it almost turns neutral pretty quick. So I'm going to put that brush stroke down, and you can see, if you look at the inserted card there, right next to the Viridian on the left, it's almost a neutral gray that I ended up with there. It's got just a little bit of green accent to it, but it's almost neutral gray. And now I'm going to add a little bit more rose, and it's going to tint it more towards the red side, but it's still kind of a charcoaly red gray. And now I'll take the pyro blue and put a little bit more of that in the Viridian, and that's going to give me a bluish green. And I'm going to add a little bit more blue, and it's going to take it even closer to the blue side of the color wheel. But you can see, if you go from the pyro red to the royal blue, you have the sap green in the middle, but you can see the variations of color that you can get with just the three colors. Now I'll take the Viridian with a heavier concentration of pigment, and I'll do the same with the Quinacridone Rose. And we'll get a dark value mixture here that's going to end up leaning towards the neutral gray. Kind of, like I said, it's almost a charcoaly color that I get. And a little green there. This mixture shifts pretty quick. When you add one or the other, it moves it to green or red or right to charcoaly, kind of a neutral. So there's my dark mark for the mixture of Viridian and quinacridone rose. And now I'm going to do the same with the Viridian and the royal blue. And there's my mark for that. So it's a dark blue-green. And some of the nuances of the color are hard to pick up in this video, but there's quite a variety you can get with just those few colors. Here I've inserted the third card, and the three colors that I'll be using for this one are burnt sienna, permanent green light, and ultramarine blue. So I'm going to put my burnt sienna on the card to the left and put a mark below. And then I'm going to take the permanent green light and get that on my palette. And we'll make a brush mark for that. And my last color is ultramarine blue. So I'll make my marks with ultramarine blue, and I'll load my brush with water and start to get these mixing together. And you can see on the card that I've inserted there how interesting some of those that mingling of color on the paper is. The way that burnt sienna and that permanent green light kind of mingle together. That's a nice color to charge a wash of permanent green light with, is that burnt sienna. It's pretty interesting. And same with the ultramarine blue. You get that cooling down of that bright green. But I think that's an interesting wash there. So now I'm going to take the permanent green light, add a little bit of burnt sienna, and you can see the brush mark right to the left of my permanent green light mark, how it's toned down. It's still green, has a green feel to it, but it's toned down from the permanent green light. And now I've added a bit more burnt sienna, and the mark closest to the burnt sienna mark in that card is about the same value as the green one, but it's much warmer because I've added more burnt sienna. So there's a definite scaling of warmth in that permanent green light as those two blocks move towards the burnt sienna. And now you can see these brush marks here with a little ultramarine blue in them, how they start to become a green blue and a blue green. They're really some nice colors. Now I'll take a heavy concentration of the permanent green light, and I'll get a heavier concentration of pigment with the burnt sienna, and I'm going to mix a dark value mixture here of the two colors. Takes a little bit going back and forth to really find the spot that you're looking for sometimes. So here's my dark valued mark. It's actually almost a very dark olive green. And then when I take the permanent green light and the ultramarine blue, it cools it down quite a bit and gives a nice blue-green, dark valued blue-green. Really, I think that this color combination, there's some interesting colors you can make. Sometimes when you're looking at color chips such as this, it's hard to understand where the application is. I'm going to use this painting of mine called Snowy Riverbank as an example. Look at all the variety of green tones that are in that upper right area. Green, blue-green, green, gold. There's quite a variety. In fact, if you look at the color card that I've inserted there, look at the two colors in between the permanent light and the ultramarine blue, those two blue-green tones. You could almost take those two brush marks, cut them out, and stick them up there in the top left-hand corner, and they'd get lost because those colors are used throughout that area. And then again, if you move to the left and look at the colors between the burnt sienna and the permanent green light, they're a warmer green leaning towards red on the left. And you can take those two colors and you can start to see some of that down in the rocks. You can see it in some of the mossy areas still on the edge of the frozen bank. So maybe this gives you some idea on how to use some of these colors. You can sit here and mix them on your palette and make little color chips, but it doesn't always translate to putting it in a composition. I've inserted a still shot of my palette as I completed the last card of the top row for this exercise. And you can take almost every one of the colors on that palette there that's mixed and take it right to the painting. From the blue-green, darker valued blue-green tones to the warmer, almost raw sienna type tones. You can almost find a spot everywhere in that painting for every one of those colors. Even some of that bright green, there's some elements in that. And I remember when I painted this, one of the things that really captured me, I painted this from a photograph I had taken as I was climbing down a snowy bank to a river. And I remember painting this going from the snow to the river where part of it was frozen, part of it wasn't frozen. And there was just this transition of blue, violet kind of tones on the snow and these blue greens in the water, and the difference between the color of the water and the frozen water that was ice but kind of green, a cool green. It was really interesting. But you can see the variety that's in this painting, and hopefully you can start to see how some of these mixtures that you can get with just a few colors can be applied in your painting efforts. So that completes the first three cards for this exercise, and these were the convenience greens. And that's the conclusion of part one. Part two, we'll pick back up and start mixing the greens rather than using those colors that are coming out right out of the tube. If you have specific questions, you can email me at contactrsurowiczart@gmail.com. Thanks for watching.